might be our last budget meeting of this year, heading with our budget for 2024. So I'm going to ask Director Saskew and CAO Ling to take over.
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this live budget meeting for 2024. This morning, we're going to be going over the draft 2024 budget that administration has put together, along with council's input and initiatives for the year. So at this time, I will hand it over to Corporate Services Director Saskew to go through all the information.
Thank you. Okay, so today is an updated draft budget from the previous time we've met. So this proposal includes the following items that were discussed in the prior meeting. So still has a 5% net property tax increase for a net profit of $160,306 that we could put into reserves. An increased monthly utility bill of $4.80. So that will be discussed in the utility section. So that's flat rates. So each monthly utility bill will be going up by $4.80. And then for the changes from the last budget meeting, so there's still no COLA for employees, but the town is taking over the employees' 20% portion of benefits to allow for a greater take-home pay for the staff versus a 2% COLA, as we had discussed the last time. There's been a reduction in the library's net ask to $256,000. There's been zero net change in parks, recreation, and facilities, as the removal of North Circle Drive upgrade and cricket pitch were offset with the increased funding for the pump track and Foxview and lights for the Riverbend Ball Diamond, and then a reduction of $15,000 for protective services because of the ceiling fans. So that is a net surplus of the $160,000. Additional things that have been added to this budget since the last meeting due to discussions were an increase to corporate services of $20,000 of an expenditures for various contracted services I've gotten quotes in the last 2 weeks, as well as we've increased our Christmas party ask from $12,000 to $15,000 as we're having harder and harder time to pay a caterer at that budget for the staff. So that is one increase that's been added since our last discussion. $15,000 has been added to programming and recreation, and $15,000 has been added to revenue for the pool and slide and Whibbit rentals. And then I have confirmed that the lifeguards, the full-time lifeguards, have been net with a $25,000 increase in private lesson revenue. So that was already in last presented budget, the revenue for the swimming lessons, but those, I can confirm that those have been there. So that's a general overview. What we're gonna do now is go through basically line by line each different department. So under the 2024 budget tab, the first page that you have here is the consolidated 3-year budget. And what we have is also a 2023 comparative of the budget and 2023 comparative of year-to-date actuals. So that is a general overview for the entire budget as a whole. One thing to note, we still have a net surplus of $160,000 as of this time, with the additions and deletions that were made to the budget since the last time we spoke. And from there, we're going to go into each line item. So the first page is taxation and general revenue. So as an overview, the net change in net property taxes is a 5% increase.
And that's a forecasted.
This is forecasted, yeah. This isn't finalized yet. And the following key items with the net municipal taxes that we had discussed the last time. So an additional $469,000 may seem like a lot, but there's several items worth noting. So the RCMP projected budget increase is $143,600. There's also the operations that we pay for the RCMP. That's $464,000 per year, and debenture principal and interest payments. There's also been a rise in all costs since the last budget that we prepared. Premiums and cost to procure goods is at an all-time high. The 2020 through 2022 budget were funded by carry forward reserves and one-time COVID grants. So as a reminder, we're operating in 2023 on an equivalent budget that we had in 2019. So we know that the price of goods in 2019 does not equal the price of goods in 2023. And this is presenting a true budget cost of the items that we have in our budget to maintain the level of service. And then the remainder of this increase has been put towards funding items that council agreed to with the 1, 2, 3 votes earlier in the budget process. So we'll go through those as we go through each individual.
Okay, so Director Saskew, for 2024, our debenture payment has not changed from 2023.
That is
Interest
correct.
rates still stand on all those debentures, and no new debentures are will be paid down or starting in 2024.
That is correct. We have made no draws onto debentures, and our debentures are set principal and interest payments. When you add the two together, the same net cost per year for the lifetime duration of the debenture is there. So the debenture principal and interest amounts may change year over year, but the net payment is always the same. So for the RCMP or for, like we have a fire truck, we have a few other ones that are still outstanding. There has been no increases to our budget for debentures in 2024, as we have not drawn anything in the current year.
So just so anybody watching would understand, let's say if you were borrowing money to build a industrial park, you'd have to put new payments in 2024. But since we haven't borrowed any money to build a industrial park, we don't have to worry about any payments ruining the lives of the citizens of this community.
That is correct.
Thank you.
There are no additional payments this year.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so any questions on any of the changes under the taxation and general revenue tab? So investment income has increased because our interest rates have gone up significantly. That is another item to note with the debentures, is you are locked in for the term of the debenture at the interest rate that it is on the day that you take it. So all of our other debentures, we have varying interest rates from 2% to 4 or 5%, but they are locked in, and that's the price we pay for the full duration of it. So we're not also subject to interest rate fluctuations. So overall, some increase in investment income due to our increased interest rates in the last couple of years that we've seen, and a slight decrease in franchise fees, which is predicted from ATCO annually. So council, you can see here that the net cost has increased about 27,000 for council. Some items to note is travel expenses have increased as we budget travel based on where conferences and other items are being held. So this past year in 2023, conferences were held in Edmonton. The current years moving forward, they're in Calgary and Red Deer. So that's why there's an increase there. And same thing with professional development. There's a slight increase there for your retreat. So overall, remains fairly stable. There has been an increase to remuneration due to our benefits package and the cost to the town increasing. So that is what that reflects. There's been no increase to council pay in 2024.
So, well, I'd like to start here. I would like to reduce council's budget by $20,000.
Okay.
And I think I don't really think that we haven't ever exceeded what the budget for council has been in the past. As a matter of fact, we financed a couple of studies for the different departments in town out of our council budget. So what was the increase from last year? Is 27?
27,828.
Actually, I'd like to propose that we keep it flat where it was.
Okay.
And it's upon all of us. I know that we all have a personal budget in there for ourselves for development. And again, I would like to propose right now that council takes that $27,000 increase out of this year's 24 budget. So I'll just bring it up. I've talked to one member who's not here today, and that councillor is very agreeable to that. Is there anybody here that's against it? Go ahead.
So I'm not opposed to reducing in this budget. I'm just curious, what that would look like. Where are you proposing that it come from? I think what you're referencing is the idea that the professional development is there as part of our remuneration, and I certainly don't want to eliminate the opportunity for council to increase their skills or be able to be more effective as governors on council. But budgeting for an expenditure that isn't utilized is something that we can certainly remove from this year's budget, knowing that there are some considerations. So where are you proposing that it come from?
Well, what I'm proposing is that we all be very prudent in our spending. And I'm not going to try to hide the fact right now that I am trying to get through today's budget with a lower tax increase than 5%. And I'm not trying to hide it. And I'm going to try to find it as we go through today. Go ahead, Councillor Bullock.
Well, I think if we as council look at our travel expenses for one thing, maybe not all of us need to go to every conference. Maybe we pick the ones that on certain committees go to certain things. And we save a little bit there out of that area too.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess my concern is making sure that we're expressing to the public that we already do that. We already are very, this isn't a council that is going all over the place and being irresponsible with the funds, because we don't make a lot of money. All of the pay that we receive as well as the benefits are all publicly accessible and easy to find. If we have other committees that we belong to, for example, some of those expenses are paid outside. So for example, FCM membership for me hasn't cost the town one penny, and in fact has been beneficial as grants have been applied to, for that we may not have been aware of before. So some of those, I just want to be clear with the public. And we do, it is also very important for us to be able to attend events, but we do attend together. We don't, yeah. So I just want to make sure that the public doesn't think that we're not being responsible, because we always are.
Go ahead, Councillor Bullock.
I wasn't implying we're not responsible, but anyways, there's also virtual parts to this, so we could actually attend virtually, some of us, and maybe some of the ones that are obviously more connected to ministers and stuff that could make more of a difference, because they know more. Makes sense to me that they would go. You know, when the rest of us could probably take advantage of the virtual part of it.
Go ahead, Councillor Lemko.
Thanks, Your Worship. I think if we're looking for efficiencies within our community, for our managers and all that, and looking for make cuts, I think we start making those cuts at the very top. We were able to function this current year, 2023, at the budget that was presented, and I'm all in favor of keeping it flat.
Okay, so our overall goal when we started this process was we knew that we're operating on taxation numbers that represent 2018, when we took a 2% cut in taxes to help everybody that we could. And we know how we operated as a municipality. We were living on a lot of reserves for a lot of projects, and probably not so much on operational costs. We've seen a great deal of pressure, inflationary pressures on the municipality. That being said, we all want to start doing our job and putting money back into reserves that we've been living off of. So, as we move forward, if we can keep the taxation increase as low as we can, keeping in mind that our goal was to replenish some of the reserves that we've been drawing from. We understand that the police costing, we can't change. We understand the increase in employees' benefits, the charges. We can't change that. But still, if we want to get to the lowest tax increase rate that we can still operate this municipality at comfortably and have small amounts of gains to put back into the reserve is the overall goal of what this budget has as we started. So I think it's prudent that we tell right now that $27,000 does not need to be collected in taxes. And we can make it work on the budget that we had last year. So I know it doesn't seem like a big amount in this overall picture, but if we all take a little here and a little there, we can successfully reach the goal that we started for. Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to agree with you on that. I think that we have, over the last several years, carpooled whenever we can. And I think that if we continue to do that sort of thing, that we can keep within this budget. I know for myself, the personal development side of it is of less concern to me now if I've been on council for 10 years. So I don't believe that I need to be expending that. But some others might want to still take some courses that benefit them. And, you know, if we sort of sort that out, I think we can keep within last year's budget.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that $27,000 that was built in to be collected in taxes this year doesn't have to be part of the plan.
Pardon me, we will make that change. Yep.
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Rudick.
Sorry, just so that it's top of mind right now, can you remind us what 1% of tax increase equates to in this current configuration?
It's about $94,000.
94. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the next page is corporate services. You will see there is a net increase in ask of $70,000. To note, this is made up of two main things. Increase in expenditures for employee benefits. As we know, the town has seen our net benefit cost has increased 18% overall, but there are certain costs that the employees pay for 100% of, which is like the long-term, short-term disability. So then when they're on long-term and short-term, it's not a taxable benefit. So that's to the betterment of employees. So the town, the net increase that we saw on the rates and premiums that we pay was 40%. So you can see here in my employee benefits, there's an increase of $17,000 for employee benefits. And you'll also see there's a decrease in salaries and wages due to the reorganizations that we had occur in this last year. The new budgeted salaries are less than prior years. So even with a drop, so to say, in staffing salaries, we still are seeing an increase in employee benefits. And then under other transactions, that's $63,000. That's a 2024 incentive that council agreed to this summer for property taxes. So that is predominantly the net increase in the ask for corporate services. As a reminder, that additional $3,000 ask for the Christmas party is also built into this budget.
Anybody have any questions there? Okay, keep going.
Excellent. So the next page is community engagement and economic development. So this is a summary as a whole. So this includes the visitor information center as well. So you can see an increase to government transfers of $75,000. That is the planned or hoped for NRED grant to help cover the cost of wayfinding. As a reminder, wayfinding is under contracted services. So you can see there's a net increase of $173,000. $155,000 of that is regarding wayfinding. As a reminder, if the wayfinding NRED grant isn't received, the net cost to the town for wayfinding will only be $55,000. So there's the $155,000 cost, $75,000 grant hoped for, $20,000 carry forward as we receive the NRED grant in 2023. So a net cost to the taxpayers of $55,000 for wayfinding in 2024. And then the other increases to this budget include the purchase of 2 new paddle boats, industrial paddle boats at the visitor information, trenching of power, and ice cream addition to the visitor information center. So those are the highlights of this budget section.
We increased the budget for more advertising as well.
Yes, yes. So there's the $55,000 net ask, or $65,000. I'd have to check our sheets, but yes, that's also included in the expenditures there.
Okay, any questions on that department? Okay,
Okay, so legislative services. So this one is actually a net decrease in ask of $64,000. Due to reorganizations, there's a net decrease in staffing costs in excess of $70,000. Slight changes to contracted and general services, but overall, that's the changes to legislative.
anybody mad about that? Okay,
Okay, so So the next one is Community Services Administration. So this is a catch-all for certain grants and payments that the town makes to different organizations. So included with this is the public health. That's the grant for the committee, as well as the grant for new doctors. We have the Northern Lights Library System costs here of $30,700. The grant to VTSS for $22,000, and the grant to Prairie Tales for $17,000. Another thing that's noted here under contracted services, we have increased our fireworks ask $5,000 as $5,000 to a net ask of $10,000, as we no longer have someone certified to fire off the fireworks at the fire department. So that is one other item to note.
I think they call them a shooter.
The shooter, yeah. And if you do note here, the transfer to local boards and agencies, there is a decrease of $40,000. The item to note that for was the 2023 contribution to the Rotary Bike and Skate Park. So the town of Vegreville had a $40,000 contribution as part of their grant funding. So that obviously doesn't need to be remitted in 2024 now. So overall, everything has held consistent with the $5,000 net increase in ask for the fireworks.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so the next one here is protective services. So this includes fire, fire, municipal enforcement, safety, and emergency management. So an overall net increase in ask. I should go, let's find our initiatives. So under fire, included in protective services, we have the SCBA communications for $26,000 this year. The ceiling fan was removed. The airbag system for $11,000. The first responder radio system for $25,000. GPS installed for the enforcement vehicles of $6,300, and bunker gear for $27,000. So that's included in this budget and some of the increases. Is there any questions relating to this?
So overall, in this department, what is the increase?
$257,000. Of that, $38,000 of it is related to our increase in premiums for the health plans.
Okay, can you explain that to me?
So our benefits premiums. So we have, the town is seeing a net increase in costs of 40%, as well as us taking on the 80-20, us taking up that 20% to pay for 100% of the benefits. That's the net increase in costs related to that part of the budget.
How many employees do we have there?
We also have the fire we pay premiums for the, is it the life insurance and the disability? I think so. Yeah. So there's several in there. So this would include all of municipal enforcement, our one worker that works at the RCMP, including our RCMP staff that we pay for. There's those 3 staff that the town pays for. That's included in there because the policing is also in here too.
We have 3? I thought we had 2.5 at the RCM.
Well, I'm counting her as a 3 because there's 3 members that work at the RCMP detachment, plus the 1, 2, 3, 4 at the fire department.
Okay.
So there's several staff members in there.
Okay, so this is a large increase over last year. Does anybody want to break into this a little bit and take a look at it? Or is everybody, go ahead, Councilor Rudick.
Sorry, this might be, we'll have to flip back a little bit, but just going through some of the larger items, excluding the employee benefit increase, goods and services, utilities, and the purchases from other government. Those 2 are significantly more. Can we dive into that a little bit?
We can. I don't actually have anything prepared at this moment. Like I can look through and quickly do a glance, but off the fly, I don't have that.
Okay, sorry, those are pretty specific. It just, I mean, if we're looking at year-over-year increase, 91% increase is significant, but maybe that's a little too granular.
A little more than significant.
Yeah.
I can comment on a few of the things. So the purchases from the other governments, that's the RCMP increase. So you can see there's 127,000 there. As we know, the RCMP increase is $143,000.
Yeah.
So there's the 143 increase, and then obviously there might be a couple areas where it's decreased, but that's the large chunk of it. So of the 257, if you take out 143, that's your difference there. Sorry, it's,
Yeah, that's fine. I think
I have my speaking notes prepared on this one.
we all know where that was coming, and we just didn't, would have been nice to just say RCMP. Would have caught it right away. Okay, well, that, again, we understand that. Do you need an expanded answer on this?
Well, and I guess that material goods, supplies and utilities, I mean, I don't know that that's necessary. It just would be helpful just to know.
A lot of the projects that were like the, for example, like the airbag system that was agreed for purchase, and that's where a lot of that would be placed in. Because everything just rolls up into generic lines that cover off a multitude of individual accounting lines, so they all get lumped in there as well.
So it's all the equipment.
All the things that we agreed to.
That we agreed to this year.
Okay, and I guess the challenge always is, I mean, and this is where, you know, having philosophical discussions about what we're willing to agree to this year. Protective services is always expensive, but it's one of those things we want to have there if we need it. So, thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, to add to that, actually, so just the goods purchased alone on fire, the 11,000 for the airbag, the 27 for the bunker gear, and the SCBA communications of 26,000, plus their just Alberta first responder cost of 25,000, and just their general goods purchased budget of 25,000 is $114,000 alone. So a lot of those increases there are related to the items that we had agreed on with the projects.
But I think that with the changes we've made at the fire department when it comes to billing, which those are in practice now, we bill for when we fight fires, insurance companies. We have an opportunity, that money will come back into the town of Vegreville, correct?
That money would go back into the fire revenue, yes.
But it won't be spent without the decision of council.
It's usually not spent without decision of council.
Okay,
It
well, I
either
think that we
carry-
better clear that up right now. It means no decisions of money will be spent without a decision of council.
Yeah, and
Okay,
we don't.
I can add to that. So any increases to budget have to be approved by council. So regardless of what revenue is received, their budgeted expenditures are what we set here today. And if there's increases that go beyond that, whether or not there's revenue to match it, that's an ask of council before it gets spent.
okay, so again, we're looking forward to the changes on the way that we operate at the fire department, and we're hoping there's gonna be a positive response. So, go ahead.
I do have one more comment. The 257 seems like a huge additional net ask as well. Now that I'm looking at things, 143,000 is the increase to RCMP out of our hands. 38,000 is the increase to our benefit costs, which is our out of our hands. And then if you note here, there's actually $63,000 net less carry forward. So the fire was also one that we were living off of carry forward reserves. So another $63,000 in this increased net ask is because of changes and not having funding carried forward due to COVID and different other grants, so.
Go ahead.
Sorry, that actually is very helpful too, because it doesn't reveal itself that we have been using reserves to be able to bolster what we're expending, so that's helpful. Just to go back to what you said, Your Worship, talking about charging for insurance, can we just explain that a little bit more clearly, because it's difficult to understand why we wouldn't have charged for that in the past. So can we just talk about that a little bit, the revenue? Explain what the difference is, or what we're approaching differently?
I, myself personally, when we talked over the last while, it's best practices, and we've been fighting fires, and everybody has insurance for that purpose. We've never been billing it out. And so now it's a chance to recoup some of our costs of operating a fire department through an insurance plan that every house owner in this community has. And when we go out on the highway to do anything out there, we bill insurance companies. And insurance companies expect to get billed when there's a fire at your house. That's why you have coverage. Just in the past, we've never done it, and it seems a shame that people are paying for that insurance, and we never ever accessed some of our cost at least to fight a fire. So go ahead, CAO. Lee.
The majority of municipalities, the taxes that, property taxes cover off the fire department of having one. Covers off the equipment, covers off like the trained members and stuff like that. It was never fully intended to cover off the cost of fighting the fires, the expense for the water and stuff like that. So the majority of municipalities bill insurance companies when the fire department goes out. So your taxes, your property taxes go to pay to have the equipment on standby and at the ready, not necessarily for the costs involved in fighting fires.
And we all know what our next truck that we just ordered is over $800,000, and the equipment, we're looking at this budget for just some apparatuses for individual firefighters, what it's costing. And if we don't start this process of billing insurance companies, then everyday taxpayers, we're gonna see a 10% increase in property taxes. Go ahead, Councillor Lemko.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm just going to go back a little bit in history. There was a time when the council of the day chose not to bill insurance companies for fires within the community. They felt that it was tax dollars that would cover that. So the reason it is the way it is because nobody offered to make a change. Therefore, after discussions we had just recently, we're making that change here, this council and administration.
And if I may, I'd like to point out one more thing. Under the revenue section there, you see the other income, the additional $10,000. That is $10,000 that we received in donations. We have received $5,000 from TC Energy and $5,000 from Enbridge to go towards our AFRAX radio system. So we are actively seeking out grants to help offset some of these costs for this new equipment as well.
Manager Newton let me know that the other day that the grants that he had applied for those new radio systems and stuff he's received, so, which is great. I mean, because to replace every radio moving forward is a huge cost, so. Okay, any more on protective services? Good.
Okay, so the next slide we have is family and community support services. You will note that we have decreased the net ask to the town since the last budget meeting of $20,000 through the use of carry forward reserves. So now the net ask is $166,386. And it was previously, pardon me? Well, you can see at the bottom, 166,386.
So from what we've seen in our last budget meeting, this request is $26,000 less?
$20,000.
20,000. Okay. Any questions? Okay, we're good.
Okay. Moving moving on, so library operations, as we had noted, has the decrease to $256,000 of funding. So that's $372 more than 2023, but approximately $60,000 less than their net ask at their presentation. I believe they were asking for $319 or $312. So a significant decrease here.
Can you show me, on the utilities, what we're paying? I mean, utilities at $39,947. Is that what the actual cost, that we're paying at the library?
That's materials, goods, supplies, and utilities. So the utility cost for the library would not be included in this budget. That's included in the library complex. This is just a general line item. So this would be their materials, goods, supplies budget. One thing to note, a lot of this is just carried forward from the prior year. I haven't gotten their detailed breakdown of where their budget is, other than their net ask and their employee wages. So the user fees and some of the expenditures might not be exactly as they are.
But we do know what it costs for utilities, janitorial, and the maintenance that we provide over there.
Yes, so that net cost is in 2024, $142,000.
So if we add the 142,000 to this 156, is what our actual funding is for the library.
Yes. 256 plus 140.
Sorry, 256. So, just to avoid a lot of confusing issues with numbers as we move forward, I would like to see council, when we're shown what we are financing at the library and what's coming out of taxpayers' dollars towards the library, I'd like to see it as a whole. And I don't think any of us want to try to bury the fact that it cost money, and it shouldn't just show this one line if that's what we're funding, because we're funding a whole lot more. Go ahead, Councilor Rudick.
So I think the challenge that I see, I don't disagree with you. I think it's helpful to be able to capture that true cost. I would suggest that if we're doing that, that it would be also, it would seem reasonable to do that across other operations as well. I mean,
Can I just stop you for a second?
Sure.
Because I don't want to get this conversation too confused. They are an independent board,
absolutely.
and when we operate any of our departments in town, we have a control over every part of their operations. We have no control over any of their operations. All we can do is give them a grant. But when we don't capture the true nature of what the grant really looks like, I don't think it's fair to taxpayers and to anybody. I know that you say that other departments and stuff, we should capture that in there, but they're an independent board that operate solely by themselves.
I'm not disputing that. What I am saying is that, for example, if we're going to capture the true cost of running any of our facilities, I think that's something that we already do. We don't roll it up and we don't explain that, because if we're going to talk about, for example, things that are outside of our control, which is the operations of the library, and we do have a council member always that sits on that board decides the expenditure and the operations of the library itself. I think the challenge that I see is to be able to be fair across operations when we're talking about the operations of our facilities and taking a look at efficiencies. That is something that we would expect our facilities manager to be able to explain and delineate, no different than when we talked about in previous budget discussions, staging out the purchasing of HVAC systems, for example, or making sure that we've got efficiencies across numerous envelopes that we manage. So I just think for the sake of expediency and transparency, that's not an unreasonable request. At the same time, I understand what you're saying, that the library does operate within a building that we provide, and the true capture of that cost would be expected by the taxpayer. But I also think that it would be expected by the taxpayer to understand how much it costs to run other facilities, like recreation facilities, this building, for example, to be able to understand life cycling, future costs, et cetera. I don't think that that's an unreasonable expectation as governors of this community and all the facilities that we run.
Go ahead, Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Bishop. I'm not going to dispute that. I think that we need to know what all of these different things cost us. But there is a little bit of a difference here because of the Library Act. And the Library Act describes some of the things that occur between council and the library board, which is a corporation. The aspect is that when it is reported to the ministry, those figures actually have to be reported to the ministry. We just don't hear of them to the same extent in council. So the forms that have to go in on an annual basis from the library has to show their revenues, their expenses, the hours that are open, all of this information. The last part of that is filled out. Basically, it's supposed to come from the municipality, but it comes out, and so you have direct payments by the library for their costs, and then you have, and that's where the local allocation from the council goes in. And then you have a second area, which is classed as paid on behalf of the library by the municipality. And that's where any of the other things that we're doing, like the building costs, the maintenance, the utilities, the janitorial, the accounting, et cetera, come into that. In 2018, that was reported to them, to the ministry, as being $66,000. I'm hearing today that it's now 142,000. So when you add the two together, that means that the library total allocation for the province is $69.72 for every resident in town, when the Act actually says that we're only responsible for $3.52, which is $20,000. So I think we're being extremely generous in how we support the library. You know, so I mean, and I don't disagree that we need to know what does the arena cost us, what does, you know, any other facility cost us. I'm not disputing that. But the actual aspect is under the Act, under the Library Act, that has to be disclosed to the government. So I think it would be nice to have it disclosed to the council.
And just to circle back, I don't disagree with you, Councillor Barry, but again, to repeat a comment that I said at a previous budget discussion, our accounting processes should not punish the ask of a library board. That is an independent body. So if we need to disclose in a different manner and accurately capture those costs, that's totally fine and acceptable. But I think we need to have the same approach across other operations. So the ask of the library is separate from our accounting processes. And I think the transparency will be appreciated by people that read the budget. But again, this is a complex that has two parts to it, two portions to it, and I guess that presents other accounting challenges for our staff. So appreciate that it's going to be a little bit of an untangling too, because some of these contracted services, for example, those are things that maybe we need to address and take a look at, because that section alone is significantly more than other facilities contracted services.
Go ahead.
To add to the contracted services line that you're seeing there, this is the libraries. This is not related to the facility. This is the library itself. So that would include their portion of the Northern Lights library fee and certain other things such as that. So half of that, I think they pay $30,000 a year for Northern Lights. So that is why it's significant, but it's just their hands are tied for that cost as well.
Yeah, so my point, and it's always been, when we get to the bottom line, it's a grant that we give the library to assist them in how they choose to operate their library. We have no say in how they operate it, although we have a counselor dedicated each term to be on the board. But when we misrepresent the use of the overall cost to run that library of property taxes, and every time that we see a presentation, it's never included. And I think it's fair that every citizen that pays property tax in this community knows exactly what the real funding is to operate that library.
The one other comment that I have is they are tied into our benefits plan. So by the town taking on 100% of the benefits, they are impacted in the same manner. So they would have, versus last year to this year, an additional $10,000 in cost to their benefits as a result of us adopting the 100% versus the 80/20. And we couldn't do something different for them. They are considered, the full-time permanents are considered employees of the town, and they are required to be participating in our plan the same way. So that's the one item that I would like you to note,
Okay,
that we've changed, that's out of their hands.
so there will be an additional $10,000 for us picking up the 20% of the benefit plan for their employees.
So I can update it to 266.
Okay? Any questions?
I have one. Is that not already captured in here with the, we shouldn't have to add that in if it's already in the 2024 budget?
Well, it is in the 2024 budget, but what we did is their original ask was in the $312,000 range. And without that increase in benefits, their net ask would have actually been just $300,000. So because we've added those additional benefits, because the cost before, when the 20% portion that was paid by the employees wasn't in the budget because we didn't have to pay for it. So we've tied their hands an additional $10,000. So what I'm saying is if we want to keep funding equivalent to the prior year, the 255 that we gave them last year, the almost 256, would be the equivalent of 266 this year.
Based on the overall plan itself.
Yes. So that would be, that's my one.
It should go up.
No, it's gonna be built in, it's just picked up in a different, again, we're raising taxes to offset the cost in benefits to the employees. And they're just lucky enough over there that the taxpayers of Vegreville in the increase are picking it up as well.
So are we okay with the 266 as the net ask, or do we want to remain at 256?
What did we approve?
You had stated 256 the last time.
So, and when we looked at what it was gonna cost overall in a tax increase to cover the portion of the benefit plan, you didn't take those employees out of that number, did you?
No, so that was in their original ask of the 312 that was in the first budget that was presented.
So right now, with the increase we're proposing, those employees are covered in there.
They're covered in there, but the library the library still funds those employees' net costs, so that's built into this expenditures, employee benefits. So by us taking on the 80/20, it's costing the library an additional $10,000 than it would have in the prior year, is what I'm saying.
Okay?
So if this was the same budget in 2023, they would have needed $266,000 to fund that additional.
Go ahead, Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Worship. So on the opposite side of that, that means their employees will get the benefit of equal to a COLA.
Yes, so
So,
by us picking up, that is true. So
so
by
they don't
us
need to
picking-
increase on a COLA or anything of this nature in their budget.
That's correct, yes.
As they're in the benefit plan, the board makes independent decisions on their own. Do they give COLA on their own to their employees?
They have not this year,
But in the past, they have.
I believe so.
And when we give a COLA to our employees, they increase their employees at the same time.
Not necessarily.
No? Okay.
No. So for example, and forgive me, I don't have the paper in front of me, but the last 2 years, there was a salary review at the time that we had a gap between hiring library managers, and we were able to have the management services provided by Northern Light Library Systems. We also did an employee job description as well as a compensation review at the same time, which identified the need to reclassify some of the staff, and there was a new grid that was proposed at that time. So there have been COLA increases in the past that have been separate from the town There are a number of staff that are actually redlined, they're red circled, sorry, that are out of scope in terms of they don't fit on the grid for a number of years of service, et cetera. And so that was something that was proposed either last year's budget or the year previous, but it's separate from the town. So they operate within the money, the grant that is provided by the town, the board administers and determines their hiring practices. So it's not necessarily tied, although sometimes it does coincidentally align with COLA increases
So.
delivered
again,
by the town.
This new term reclassified, that's what we call raises now, right?
Absolutely not. That's not at all what it was. In fact, what it did is identify the fact that we have positions at this library that are maybe not, they were too specific. They needed to be more, sorry, I'm having a hard time with my words. Be able to, if it's a library page or a programmer, to be able to manage different job descriptions and be able to manage different functions within the library. So that was, with the assistance of the Northern Lights Library System, be able to identify some weaknesses and some strengths of the staffing complement that we had there. No, reclassifying did not equate to raises. It was actually identifying what staff we have there, what jobs we need to be filling, the capacity of the operations of the library at that time. And I think that was completed either in 2022 or it might have even been at the beginning of this year, 2023.
Go ahead, Councillor Curtis.
Thank you. It seems like we have two options. We leave it the same. The employees will still get their benefits paid for. The library will have $10,000 less to operate with, or we add the 10 and make it what would have been the ask prior.
Well, when we looked at the increase in taxes and what it would look like picking up this extra 20%, this was already included in it. So we're actually collecting this money in taxes already in the.
Not if we decrease their ask to 256, then we're not for the
Okay,
library
but
section.
if we leave it at 256, when we looked at the tax increase to cover these costs, we're still collecting what we needed with those employees included. So it's just, do we give it to them and they pay their employees that? Like, I mean, I'm not sure who gives them the money.
Well, it's not necessarily the money. So the payroll comes off of that we pay for their payroll, but the net cost, the expenditures get coded to their budget.
So when they get a paycheck, whose bank account does it come out?
It comes out of our bank account. It goes into their expense on their budget.
But we've already included these employees as if they were our own. We're already going to be collecting in the tax increase to cover their cost of the benefit plan.
Except for with the expense, if we don't increase the expense on the library side, so if we left it at 256, they're operating the same as prior year with a $10,000 deficit because now their expenditures have to go to cover this increase.
So actually, the $10,000 is already built into our tax increase. It's just if we decide to give it to them or not, because if we leave them short. But we're already taxing the citizens of Vegreville to show what to cover that. If we don't give it to them, we have $10,000 left in our account, basically.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Your Worship. If we give it to them, that jumps it to $72 per resident that we're funding the library. And provincial average is 44 for all communities. And in 2018, we were at $55 per resident. At some point in time, as much as I think the library is fantastic here, I think that I support the library, I think they do a tremendous service. At some point in time, we have to start taking a look at what our property taxes are going. We just can't keep adding and adding and adding and adding when we're operating above and beyond. I mean, we're above and beyond. We're at 13 times what the province is asking us to actually do. So I think that we're operating a tremendous library here, but at what point in time do we start holding back the property tax commitment to the library. I mean, what is that costing a family of 3 if every man, woman, and child is being charged $72 a person? You know, it's just, I just, at some point in time, I have to say, enough's enough.
Thank you, Councillor Riddick.
So I appreciate the fact that we want to be very judicious about the money that we collect in taxation, and I'm certainly not opposed to having frank conversations. The problem that I have here is that it's very easy to pick on the library in this situation, and there has been more discussion about this particular line item than there has been when we talked about protective services, and there was significantly more money allotted to that area. While I understand that RCMP and firefighting are extremely important to provide safety for our citizens here, we are, as a council, talking repeatedly about making sure that we have people as our core. We've identified that in our strategic plan. We've talked about the fact that we want to increase the number of people that live here. And one of the reasons that people come here are for the amenities and the services that are provided in our community. All while we need to balance the taxes that we levy against the residents and our businesses that are coming here. And I would just remind all of council that if we are going to be talking about how much everything costs each member of this community, we had a discussion last night, we had a presentation about the percentage of people that use certain facilities. If we're going to use the same measure, I think we should be able to take a look across the other things that we provide to our citizens. I mean, I've never had to call the fire department, thank goodness, but I know that I'm paying for it in spades on my tax bill every year. And for me, I will say that for the people that I interact with and for my family, I think it's important that we provide these services. So while I appreciate the fact that being able to justify that not everybody uses a library per se, there are a lot of people that don't use the skating rink or use the arena or use the swimming pool. And we pay a lot for those services and those amenities for our residents, current and future. And when we're talking about recruiting businesses, the businesses that are coming here have people that work for them. And the reason that they're going to move here is because we have the amenities to provide for them. So all that to say that this is a large philosophical discussion. At the same time, I understand that it's expensive. And I'm certainly not suggesting that we need to offer services that are greater than other locations, but Vegreville is a hub for the region, and there are some costs that we assume. And in this particular instance, I think that we've changed some of our accounting practices, and we're holding the library accountable and spending more time talking about them than we talk about other departments that cost us far more with less transparency. I understand that the board adjudicates that money, and even this $10,000 here, I think honestly that's an accounting decision. And I don't think that the library board should be punished by us deciding as council that we're going to assume the benefits cost. Should we be talking about at what level we fund the library? Absolutely, but let's not lose sight of the fact that we didn't have very many questions about a budget line item that's significantly more.
Okay, thank you for that. So at this time, moving forward, Director Saskew has tasked us with what do you want administration to do when it comes to the benefit plan, the 20% for the library? Do we leave their funding at 156, or do you want to kick it up to 166? Sorry, I keep forgetting that, yeah, 256. So I think we've heard from you, you're not in favor of it. You're in favor of leaving at where we're at today. Okay, Councillor Bullock.
I understand and hear what everybody's saying here today, and I understand some areas haven't taken much of it as a cut as some or others going to take, but I'm going to be at 256 on this one.
Yeah, and okay, thank you. Councillor Lemko.
Yes, Your Worship. I feel that the 10,000 added to this would be viable based on the discussion points here today.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Curtis.
Thank you. I favor keeping it at 256.
Okay.
I do.
You want me to say something?
Sorry, Your Worship, not to be pointed, I think it's obvious what your position is, but there is no holds out in being able to say what your vote is.
Again, I am basically saying the 256 is the max, and I would, again, I know that we operate a very nice facility and we offer some good programming there. And try to invite people to come to our community. I know amenities are important, but I just feel that we get to a point where are costing comparables to other municipalities. I know we go line by line, look at our res and look at our non-res and where we fit in the province. But if we keep making decisions to be 40% higher in certain costs, we'll never be able to bring our taxation level down. And I think people are more concerned about where we fit in the taxation grid than what we spend on the library. So, that being said, I'm in favor of leaving it where it's at. And again, I really don't want to see any more grant funding coming forward unless we put in every bit of money that is being spent over there. I just feel that it's not fair to hide those other costs to the taxpayers. Is there any more comment on the funding for the library? Seeing none, it stays where it's at. Now, we'll get to the rinks and stuff like that, and we'll figure this out.
Okay. So the next slide that we have is Parks and Recreation. So this includes the swimming pool, the arena, actual servicing of our parks, boulevards, sports fields, etc. So you can see there's an increase in revenue for user fees and sales of goods and services. Those are your swimming lessons that you had wanted us to ensure that was covering the full-time lifeguards. So that's the $25,000 increase for the full-time lifeguards is covered by that increase in user fees. And then in the other income, the $34,500, that is $15,000 for programming and $15,000 for the pool, slide, Wibbit, rental, etc. So those are those increases there. The expenditures, the salary and wages, and the employee benefits are a result of increments. So we have a lot of staff that are new at Parks and Recreation, so they are moving up the grid annually versus some of our other departments where we have some very long time standing staff members. So that's why you see a little bit of a shift there. We have contracted services, a slight increase, and same thing with materials, goods, supplies, and utilities. Those are included in the budgeted items that we had discussed before. I've lost my page now. Parks and Recreation. So there's the cost for the Pasanka Park gazebo and flower bed of $25,000. There's a triple deck mower replacement reserve of $66,000, so that's on the transfer to reserve. And the bottom there, we've increased funding for the pump track drainage for $5,000. The Wibbit is $25,000. There's the landfill security upgrade for $5,000. Oh, that one's actually facilities, sorry. And there is the 2 full-time senior guards of $23,000 and the servicing of the ice plant compressors for $20,000. What else do I have? The ball diamond bleacher replacement for $25,000 and the other one is the diving board replacement for $7,500. So those are the ones that are related to Parks and Recreation. So the net increase is $230,000, and you can also note there's some capital from operations in there too, from $273,000 to $70,000. So there's a $200,000 difference in that line item. So that's the capital purchase that were funded in the capital budget in 2023 that are actually funded in operations in 2024.
Okay. As we look at this, and it's a year from today, how are we going to recognize the profit that we're assuming is going to happen? Over top of the additional wages, how are we going to measure that out? Because that is going to be important to us. We're made decisions based on advice that we're being given from senior staff saying if we go ahead and hire these employees, we spend this money on this equipment, the potential revenue will offset it. How will we measure this?
That would be through our variance analysis. So we're actually scheduling quarterly variance analysis. We're in the new year scheduling different managers to come before council. So that is the plan for our administration moving forward into the 2024 year to be more accountable to council. So that is actually one of our main goals, and we have a plan in place to show you a variance analysis, and instead of doing the big long one like this, we're going to do more piecemeal where it's like we're going to talk parks and recreation and do variance analysis and present it before you at those different variance times so that we can ask better questions and not have to just glaze over items.
Okay, well, I think we're all looking forward to it. We're changing the way we operate. We're bringing in some different lifeguards, offer more courses. We have now a recreation planner, and we're going to start utilizing our facilities more, again, bringing in more revenue. And we all look forward to being it plain black and white after a year of the changes and what it looks like. So again, I hope the accounting is done well in that department, and we recognize what we're being told is going to be, first of all, offsetting the cost of the employees that we're hiring and helping with the cost to run the facilities. Go ahead, Councillor Rudy.
So again, recreation, necessary and expensive. So I appreciate what you've just highlighted, Your Worship, because we talked about this quite a bit. And I appreciate that we've implemented variance reporting over the last number of years, because this is something that I asked for, and I'm happy that it's going to be a little bit more pointed and a little bit more frequent so that we can capture real time as we go throughout the year, because I think it's important for us to understand the impact of our budget decisions in real time, to be able to pull things back or feel like we need to have a better idea of revenue is going to be generated and being able to capture that. My question is about contracted services. Can you just explain again what is captured here? I know some of these are things that we can't avoid. I'm sorry, Megan, or Director Saskia, for being pointed here. Contracted services for this department are significant, and I would guess that a lot of this, for example, is ice plant contracting, et cetera, but it is a significant amount of money, and I just want to have an idea of what's captured here.
Yeah, for sure. So, for example, the servicing of the ice plant compressors for $20,000, that it makes up $20,000 of that $45,000 increase there. We've also had many issues with water slides and any of those other items. So even the servicing of like anything like that, like spraying dandelions, weeds. Yeah, so all sorts of things, like even the cost of flowers that we put in all of our front, like that's all contracted services, because we're paying someone to offer a service for us. We're not just purchasing a good.
Okay, thank you. Just like $45,000 increase, I understand the $20,000 for having the ice plant as part of that configuration. It's just $431,000 and change is our contracted services, which is significantly more than the $20,000 or the purchasing of the services to be able to provide the beautification of the parks around the town. So are there other significant expenditures here? Because this would be an example, again, of contracted services that some things, and I appreciate the new manager has done a good job of bringing more things in-house and providing an opportunity to make more revenue. I'm just wondering if there are any areas here that we're looking at in the future, again, when we're talking about variance reporting quarterly. This might be an area too, again, where we're able to take a look and see what kind of capabilities and capacities we have within house to be able to capitalize on.
And I'm just looking through, thank you for pointing that out. So I'm just looking through the items that are in the contracted services line items. So we're just seeing inflationary pressures. So budget to actual is very tight for the year. Like, for example, 2023 actual is within $1,000 in parks right now. So there's just been $1,000 or $2,000 increase amongst. So within Parks and Recreation, we have the administration, swimming pool, arena, parks and open spaces, campgrounds, boulevards, sports fields, and playgrounds. So all of those different departments, even just adding $2,000 for inflationary pressures amongst all of those different contracted services lines, that makes up almost the additional $20,000 right there. So there's no other large increases. It was just adjusting the budget to reflect the new costs going forward.
Thank you.
Okay, so someplace in this goods and services, there is a backup pump for the water slide, and it's sitting on a shelf. Okay. What should be?
It's not running right now.
It was on Saturday. Okay.
The pump went?
What the what?
Okay, but we do have a backup pump? Okay. Okay, water slides only are pumps, but I guess you gotta get electricity to them, but. Okay, I'm just saying that because when you sat in this seat and that water slide is down and the phone just never stops ringing. What does the matter with this organization? Who's in charge over there? Why can't you guys have a pump on the shelf? So, for anybody out there listening, it's not the pump today.
But it'll be, sorry, and that's not the purpose of this meeting, but it won't be operational for a month? Okay. Plot twist. That's a plot twist. I didn't know that, so I guess that's hot off the press.
Henceforth, by purchasing that Whibbit, we give people another option to continually use the pool and have fun with it, right?
Okay. Any more conversation on the parks and recs on the line items here? Okay, well, we look forward to, we'll have quarterly updates, or how are we gonna have updates on this budgeting and, as the year goes on? Go ahead, CAO Ling.
We've created a plan for the managers to come in quarterly. Their quarters aren't going to reflect a natural calendar quarter because we don't want to bring everybody in front of you at once. So throughout every month, you are going to speak to different managers that are going to bring in how their departments are doing. And then we will have the full accounting quarter variance report on the actual financial quarters as well.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to facilities.
Yes, I was gonna say, this one's been a hot topic today, so.
Yes, it has.
You can see that the net ask for facilities has actually decreased by $257,579 this year. So you can see there's not been a huge change to user fees and sales of goods and services. That is because our facilities have been, so to say, underutilized. The event center, all of those have been not quite meeting budget amounts. So that's our hope, is to even just meet what our targets were in prior years. There is another income scheduled in there. I don't know what that one is off the top of my head. It's a slight increase of $25,000. You can see just a various increase to salaries and wages. That's very much a grid movement, and the increase for employee benefits. One thing to note with the facilities is some of these staff are employed throughout, so they get coded to admin in all the different areas. So this might not be just the full encompassing of that whole staff members. They get distributed throughout the whole budget as they work in different areas. So same thing, contracted services up slightly due to inflationary pressure, and then decreases of materials, goods, and supplies, and interest on long-term debt. So that is where very much unchanged for facilities.
What reserve are we topping up at 45,000?
That is the, there is one in there. I don't know that one off the top of my head. I can find out.
So we're putting into reserve, but then we're also taking out 103 out of another reserve.
Oh, actually, so that's a difference there. So that 45,000, that was that's comparison from 2023. So that was the, one-time transfer in. So we're just transferring in 10,000, that's for the Heather Curling Club, the matching grant. And then,
Okay, so that reserve tops out at 100,000, it's at
Yes.
96 today.
and that's why it's at $10,000. So that $45,000 difference, council self-funded a separate reserve. And so we're not funding that this year because the reserve is topped out, so.
So it tops out at 100. So the Heather Curling Club, which they're expecting to have a meeting here pretty soon,
They spent 12 this year for the repairs.
yes?
So there is room for the 10 again.
There is?
Well, in 2024,
4,
yes.
okay. Okay,
In the event, like, we would budget it, because in the event there's additional repairs, then the money is there to replenish the reserve back up to 100 for the end of the year, right?
that's, well, if there's room for them to put in their 10,000 and us to put in our 10,000, fine. But if there's only enough room for them to put in 2, I'm pretty sure that they're gonna put another 8 off in their general reserves, because everybody understands moving forward what happens if that ice plant goes down. So if we top it up with 2,000 to meet the max on that reserve, are we putting another 8,000 into a building reserve, or is there a line item for that 10,000 within this budget, is what
Well,
I'm
and that is, we put the $10,000 in, and so if we only have to contribute $2,000 to match the Heather Curling Club, that's the externally restricted reserve, we can put the remaining 8 into just our building reserve for the multiplex.
and that's the commitment they wanna make over there too, that because the reserve has a limit to what it should be, we all know what the cost looks like if there's a major problem. So they are requesting that we keep moving forward again, and if we put it in the building reserve, that's fine. Go ahead.
I just wanted, I know that maybe I should have said it in parks. I don't know if it's facilities or parks, but we took out the potential development of a cricket pitch. And in speaking with the folks from City of St. Albert, for example, that has an overbooked, constantly utilized cricket pitch that is rented for the entire summer, that similar to hockey, something that we're not familiar with, that there are players and teams that would be highly interested in participating in the development of a cricket pitch if there was one to be developed. So I just didn't want to lose that conversation, so I'll pass that along to you, manager, and then maybe connect you with some of those folks, because again, similar to ice time, there's a limited availability, and cricket is highly popular, and the cricket pitches in both Edmonton and St. Albert are used constantly.
Yeah, and then I think at our last budget meeting, we all made a decision that let's have some consultation with people locally first, and then we'll take a look at our options for next year's budget. Okay, is there any more questions on facilities? And I know that we made a grant application, or we will be making a grant application to make ourselves a little more accessible and for people with disabilities, and we've identified a few problems that we'd like to take care of here. Okay. No other questions? Thank you. Okay, look at the money in this one. Infrastructure planning and development.
Thank you. So you can see the net ask for infrastructure has increased 108,000, but if you actually scroll up, the interfund transfers, so as we had said, we've been living in reserves in the prior year. There's a decrease of 195,000 in our transfers from reserve this year. So you can actually see the net revenue over expenditures. The net ask of the actual bulk of IP&D has decreased 86,000 this year. So we had been budgeting some things based on inflationary pressures, and there were certain things such as fuel that we actually were able to reduce slightly this year, and that's where you're receiving some of those savings. As a reminder, I'll let Dale speak to some of his budget items shortly, but some of the items that we had in the capital and special projects were the concrete crushing for $160,000. That's not included in this part of the budget because that's a capital item. The paving of 47th Ave is also a capital item, so it's not included in this operational part of the budget. We'll be getting to capital in a couple more pages here. There's $70,000 for CRF sand seal, $40,000 for refurbishing of manholes, $1,000 for $1,400 for backup cameras for the graders, $8,000 for the automatic hydrant wrench, the hydraulic tamper for $4,000. Sewer lining program is $100,000 paid out of capital this year, so that's also not reflected in this budget. There's cemetery sign landscaping for $5,000. There's landscaping of the Columbaria Plaza for $5,000. Headstone leveling, which is $4,500. That is in this budget, but it's also funded through $4,500 of a carry forward reserve. There is a half-ton purchase. That's funded $65,000 through a reserve. $24,000 for compactor cylinder hoist. Gravel roads at the landfill for $25,000. CAN bus training $5,600. The Allison transmission software for $1,600. The spool gun for the welder for $2,600. The extended landfill seasonal position for $4,000. Parts washer, $17,700. That's paid out of operations, so that capital item is also in our budget here. The garbage truck deposit is paid out of capital, so that's $46,000. And then we have several other items in utilities and sanitary. So pump house valves, $57,000. Lagoon fencing, $28,000. Rebuilding pump 3, $30,000, and the reservoir cleaning for $30,000. So then there's capital items of capital works at 52nd Street for $30,000, or $300,000, which is funded as capital. Completing the MDP, which is in development, the municipal development plan, that $10,000 is funded through carry forward reserve, and a laptop purchase that can do AutoCAD for that same department of $3,500. So that's what's included in this part of the budget.
We're not topping up any reserves at all in this budget.
Actually, we are $310,000 we're topping up. So there's reserves for the crawler, loader, the compactor, and I think a backhoe as well. Oh, and there's $50,000 for the half-ton, the fleet reserve every year.
So the normal reserves that we put into every year for the equipment, they're all going for it within this budget.
Yes, as well as there's the transfer to reserve from the utility bill to the infrastructure.
Infrastructure.
Yes.
Okay. Questions? I know.
Well, I'm going to bring this question forward. Sorry, Dale, this isn't specifically towards you, but I think it behooves us to take a look at the salary and employee benefits across departments, and you've got a large component of staff that do a wide variety of jobs. So just to get a better capture, when we're looking at salaries and wages, and sorry, this may not be Dale, this is more a Director Saskew question, but we've talked repeatedly about employee benefits, that the cost of the benefit program has increased drastically. The town council has decided that we will assume that cost to be able to leave employees more money in their pocket in an appreciable way rather than COLA. And I think maybe that portion of our conversation would be good to have again, just to reiterate that the cost drivers in the benefit provision have increased drastically. And in order to compensate for that, rather than doing a COLA, that people are maybe cost of living adjustment at a time when inflation still is a challenge for folks, including our employees, that covering that additional 20% is a way to be able to allow staff to have more money in their pocket. And then my other part of the the question is, when we're looking at salary and wages across departments, there are increases across all of them, and some of them are significantly more. So I don't know that we've increased our staff complement, except, for example, we know that there was a couple of additional or changes of staffing for Parks and Rec, which is why we had the reference to being able to link revenue that's driven by hiring additional employees. But is there a way to be able to explain across departments that there are some that have a significant increase in salaries and wages and others that seem nominal?
I can speak to that a little bit. I did allude to that fact. So as we had mentioned before, we have lots of new staff in some areas and a lot of long-term standing staff in other areas. And one of those areas would be under Director Lefebvre's department. So with the 2% increase in salaries and wages, we have many of their staff members that are long-serving employees. So there's 8 grids on the grid. So after 8 years, employees are topped out. So they don't get a raise unless they get a COLA, and many of Director Lefebvre's staff are topped out. So that is why it's more of a nominal increase. Also remember that a percentage of 2% on $2.5 million is a lot different than a 5% on $300,000. So percentages are reflective and indicative, can be read a few different ways. You can see the net cost to employee benefits of the $77,000. There's a lot of staff members there. So alluding to the fact that the salaries and wages are only increasing slightly, that's showing that a lot of his staff are fully maxed out at their grids. So without a COLA, they're not getting any pay increase in this next year, other than us taking on some of the benefits. I can speak to that a little bit. So us taking on the 20% portion of the staff's benefits is similar in cost to a 2% COLA or $100,000. This idea was presented that the town taking over 100% premiums allows employees to have more dollars in their pockets in the new year than a 2% COLA. So we did this, we did a study and a sampling of several different salary classes, and that held true for most employees, that us taking over the 20% benefits is greater dollars in their pocket than a 2% COLA and paying the benefit increase in the new year.
And it also protects them on the gross salary.
Correct.
Because it may, another 2% may move certain families or individuals up on a taxation grid from levels of government, or not qualify for certain programs because of the gross increase.
Yes, so subsidies, GST rebates, climate rebates, Canada and Alberta child benefits are all income-based. So sometimes moving someone up a 2% COLA could move them up a whole grid, and they could be left with hundreds of dollars less in their pockets monthly.
Okay, well, this department's hard to tear apart and, you know, to find out where, I mean, first of all, it has the most employees in it, so. But overall, I mean, we do have a huge project that's starting at the forced sewer replacement over there. And so we don't have a lot of capital projects coming up in this year's books. So, I mean, other than trying to manage a contractor, hopefully, you know, things will be a little, we're not typically, I mean, we're still gonna be doing our sidewalks. We're still gonna be doing the maintenance on roads and stuff where they're needed. We just don't have a huge infrastructure project that within roads and streets. We're concentrating more on the forced sewer right now, so. Okay.
That segue leads us into our replacement and capital projects for 2024. So the next page here is,
What? Go ahead, CAO Ling.
I was just wondering if this would be just a natural place to stop for a few minutes for a bio break.
So you're considering everybody else.
I'm considering everybody else, yes I
Okay.
am.
So that's, I sort of have a fault there, yeah, okay. Let's try that, let's have a break. Okay, go ahead. Okay, welcome back. We've had a short break, and we will get back to the business of the day, trying to put together the finishing touches on our 2024 budget. Take it away, Director Saskew.
Thank you. So this next page that we have is the replacement projects slotted for 2024. So we have community engagement and economic development. They have a wayfinding project for the $150,000 cost. Funded from grants is 75, funded from operating reserve is 20, and tax funded is 55,000. The banner replacement, 5,000 funded through operating. We have the aquatic diving board, that's 7,500. That's funded through operating. We do have a grant application in for that currently. So it's not, the grant revenue is not in our budget at this time because it's not guaranteed, and it's also not contingent that we get the grant revenue to replace the diving board. So the wayfinding project, the grant revenue, even though we haven't officially received it, if we don't receive that 75,000, we will not be spending that amount. The diving board has to be replaced irregardless of whether we get the grant or not. So, rebuilding the ice plant compressor is $20,000 funded out of operations. Tree replacements of $20,000 funded out of operations. Pasanka Park gazebo and flower garden, $25,000 funded out of operations. Pump track drainage of $5,000 funded out of operations. Ball diamond fencing, $15,000 funded out of operations. The spectator bleachers for the ball diamonds, $15,000 funded out of operation, or $25,000, sorry, funded out of operations. The lights at Riverview, $15,000 funded out of operations. There's the unspecified replacement projects. That's the one that we talk about for facilities. That's the $50,000 funded out of operations. We have Public Works facility washroom upgrade, $15,000. Post office facility front stair replacement, $26,000. And we are also applying for grants for this one as well as under disabilities and inclusiveness grants. So that is, once again, not contingent on replacing it, but we are working to get that funded. And then our local asphalt repairs for $100,000 funded out of operations.
Go ahead, Councillor Bullock.
Just want to go back to the tree replacements. I do believe reading there were some grants for tree replacements. Do you know about those? I can't think of the names right now, so I'm just.
Yes, so those are being applied for as well, but once again, the plan is to replace the trees whether or not we receive the grants. So it's, the revenue hasn't been built into the budget.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like no more questions on those replacement projects.
Okay, so the next page is capital funded out of operations. So this is the exact same capital that we looked at the last time, just displayed a little bit differently. So the replacing of engine 1 is funded through the reserves with the county and the town. So that's the $80,000 that we contribute to reserve annually in accordance with our fire agreement. The WIBIT is paid out of operations as well as the FCSS and IP&D security walls. The MCC pump and control system, so that is for our utilities, is funded through grants. The garbage truck is funded through grants. Paving 47th Ave is funded through grants. Hard surface roadway is funded through grants as well as reserve, so that's out at the cemetery. So we had $27,000 for phase 3 that wasn't spent this year, carried forward to next year, plus an additional cost of making the road wider is being covered out of our capital grants. The half-ton is funded out of our reserve, so we have the fleet reserve and 1 half-ton a year is purchased out of it. The parts washer is paid out of operations, and then our sewer lining, our concrete crushing, and our concrete crushing are funded through grants this year rather than operations. And then the forced main replacement is funded through grants and a debenture. That is our plan for 2024.
Go ahead, Councillor Rudick.
So I'm going to ask the question that has been posed, not directly to council, but just in general information. There's nothing that directly refers to any expenditures from capital for our industrial park. Why is that?
Because that is not budgeted for 2024. It's to be completed this year, and we're not pulling any debentures for that park.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think council knows that, but I think it's important for the public to know that too, that the completion of Prosperity Park is largely derived from federal and provincial grant funding and isn't going to cost the taxpayers directly. Thank you.
So what you're saying, we haven't ruined the lives of people's children with a debt of $12 million borrowed. It's kind of funny, yeah. I guess would have been nice if somebody had asked that question. Anyway, good job.
Thank you.
Oh, is there any more questions about how these capital operations are going to be funded?
Sorry, I do.
Go ahead.
Can you just remind me again, we had the Canada Community Building Fund, where we ended up allocating that amount to, where specifically we had that amount allocated to?
So I will get you to flip this large chunk to the capital tab, and we'll go for more in-depth look at where amounts are being spent.
We could just stop for 1 second and just come back the forced main replacement. I know that we've sent that letter to transportation regarding the overcosting after the tender was accepted. Have we followed that up at all before we start this project?
At this point, we have not received anything, but it is on our radar to go back to them
Okay,
and
so
find out what's.
we had the meeting with the DM. So what we'll do is we'll get together probably the first of the week, and we'll go back and find out where that application is in their system, so.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. So is everyone on the capital tab? So the first page here is the same basic summary that we were just looking at. But if you flip to the second page, it'll say 2024 capital grants, and it'll show you MSI, CCBF, LGFF, AMWIP, and STIP. So as you can see, the CCBF, as Councillor Rudick was asking, we're paying for the MCC pump and control system, $279,000. We're paving 47th Ave for $103,500. We're doing the hard surface roadway for $33,500, and 52nd Street, $150,000 is being paid for by CCBF, for a total cost of grant funds in 2024 of $566,000, and carry forward amount of $31,000 into 2025.
Thank you for that specific answer and giving that, pointing that out. Last week, of course, speaking with federal counterparts about the importance of the Canada Community Building Fund and the ease of application and the ability to carry it forward, because it's based on allocation, not application. And as every department knows, if you have a guaranteed amount that you're receiving and then you just have to explain afterwards what you've received, it's very easy to be able to do the work that we do in a municipality like Vegreville, where we have changing needs relative to the application of this infrastructure fund. So thank you for that. And I'll just mention it here that there has been increasing talk about municipalities not being transparent with the funds that they receive. But again, all of the information that we're discussing here in this format is also available to the public as well as to the government. So it's very clear we can't run a deficit. And this fund is extremely important to us to be able to do some work in a variety of different ways. So thank you for explaining that.
Absolutely. And these breakdowns, while they're not on the screen right now, will be included in the final capital budget that is presented before council for approval at the next council meeting if we get everything completed here today.
So you're done.
We're done, I think. Oh, there was one more page. So if we flip back to where we were, I have the 5-year capital plan. So this year I did something a little bit differently. I outlined it all on one easy-to-read spreadsheet so we can see where the different plans are. So you can see this year, in 2024, we're doing the forced main replacement and no other large capital projects. On the very bottom line of each of the years 25, 6, 7, and 8, you can see we always do a 1.5, $1 million to 1.5, $1.6 million project. Those have all been pushed to facilitate us being able to complete the forest main and the other needed items for 2024. So those are all planned for 25 and on. Is there any questions on any items or line items that are detailed here?
Well, it's nice that you know exactly what's gonna break and what isn't gonna break first. So cool.
Well, and to be fair, some of these are, I can do a more detailed breakdown. I will in the final capital sections, because we do need to say what's funded from reserves or grants, et cetera. But some of these, like for example, the crawler loader, we have a reserve that is allocated for that annually into the equipment reserve. And so the purchase of the $450,000 crawler loader will not have a net cost to the taxpayers that year, with the exception of just replenishing the reserve, the annual allotted amount. So by us using the reserves to fund these machines, we are putting an amount away every year, and then the purchase of it, hopefully without extreme increases to inflation, the reserve will cover the purchase of the new machinery as it's needed, or like you said, if it breaks down a little bit early, we may be able to replace it at that time.
Go ahead, Councillor Bullock, sir.
Another question I have, in the years going forward, we have the pickups. I'm showing 65,000 and 2026, half ton there and a half ton for utilities in the same year. So why are we showing two in the same year? We agreed to one per year, correct?
I noticed that too, but that's where the plan was, so.
Okay.
It looks like we're missing one for the 2025 year.
Oh, good, we don't need one.
I think it just got dropped into that category, should be up one. So we get one every year, like you said.
So, nothing to do with this year's budget, but where does the resurfacing in front of PV Mart fall into our 5-year plan?
I think I got pushed,
It's on here.
isn't it?
Is that Highway Avenue East?
Yes. Because Veg Ford Service Road, as people know it as, is industrial, the highway west.
Correct. I was hoping that was the project, at least it still is on there, so it's pushed back again, but it's still made the overall list, so. Okay, so that's the information broken down, where the money's coming from, how it's gonna be spent, what it looks like with a 5% tax increase. So overall, there's $160,000 left for reserves.
Plus an additional 27,828, what you have reduced the council budget for. So now that's a net revenue profit of $188,134 for 2024. Sorry.
Go ahead.
And I think it's important for us to just be clear in understanding, we have put monies into reserves.
Yes.
In different departments deliberately. So there are reserves we've been replenishing, so,
Yes.
okay.
We just haven't made at times when we have a profit at the end, we'll put money into just our general reserve to replenish, and then that can be used as needed or restricted by council as needed at our different reserve meetings. But at this point in time, we have a net profit of $188,134. And council can decide if we want to put money into the general reserve or how we want to deal with that profit.
So, again, that's working on a 5% property tax increase. So now that we're at the end here, is, like I asked earlier, who would like to entertain? Go ahead, Councillor Bullock.
So, Director Sasky, you said 1% of tax is 94,000 currently?
Yes, a round number.
A round number of around 94,000. I think we have the ability to not tax our residents and businesses 5%. I think we could do it at 4%. That's where I'm leaning. I really don't want to burden our taxpayers any more than we are already. I think it's tough. We have to go up. It's hard for me to swallow that one, but I also don't want to take more than more than we can make everybody, cough up either. I think we should be responsible. We tried to make the cuts that we could to ourselves today to aid in that, so I think I would be supporting a 4%, but I won't support a 5%.
Okay. Well, I think everybody understands where we're at here. I mean, there is some reserves that are below the funding model that's in place right now. And again, we know that coming next year, we're gonna see increased costs for our CMP based on new purchases that they will be buying, plus the fact that they're negotiating a new contract right now in salary. So we know again, next year, no matter what we do, if we don't spend one dime over where we're at right now, we're gonna be, again, going back to the taxpayers on that principle alone, funding the policing model. I know that, go ahead, Councillor Curtis.
Thank you. Just a quick question, just to get my numbers right. We are currently at the same taxation percentage we were in 2019 or 2020, what year is it?
It's 2019, so it's the budget that we prepared in 2018 and the budget that for 2019 and the budget that we prepared in 2019 for 2020 are the exact same taxation level that we're at before the tax increase this year.
Right. So again, I too don't want to raise taxes more than we have to, but we also need to keep up with the times as well. So we need to think about that before we reduce that. If we're just going to gain it again or add it to next year, what is the benefit to waiting? What is the benefit to putting a 5% in now when most municipalities in the province are 5% or higher in this budget year? I'm not going definitive. It's a talking point. It's a thinking point. What's the benefit to keeping it at 4 now compared to next year? It's something we should all think about.
Go ahead, Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Worship. Mine's a bit of a question as well. So if we were to drop to 4, would that basically be, instead of 188,000 going to reserve, it'd be 94,000 less collected and 94,000 going to reserve?
Yes.
That would be basically, so what we're doing is reducing what we put back into reserves. But just to be clear, we are covering ourselves pretty well, and we have actually given, in this, the staff actually get treated better on this budget. So we're really just trying to decide what we want to put into reserves. If we stay at 5, we're collecting another percent to put another 94,000 into reserve. I got to think about that for just a minute here. I don't want to tax any more than we have to, but I am sort of like Councillor Curtis is asking, is it more prudent for us to put a little extra back into reserve just in case we were using we had rainy days, so we were using our reserves up. And the way the economy is going, should we be protecting ourselves by putting a little bit more into reserve again? That's my question.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thanks, Your Worship. This question is for Director Saskew. Based on a $300,000 assessment, what would be the 5% that we're talking about right now increase to the household? I know it's putting you on the spot here, but
I'm actually just trying to pull up my PowerPoint from the last time when we had explained that to you, because that's all encompassed in those slides, but I can just pull it open. If you give me one moment, I'll open it.
thank you.
Go ahead.
Maybe while you're pulling that up, Director Saskew, I'll just weigh in here too. I think the challenge is budgeting feels like an immediate process, but it is a long-term process. And I think that's where some of the debenture debt that we have assumed as a council collectively over the years is good debt. For example, Director Saskew was very clear about the percentages that we're paying on some of the infrastructure that provide necessary service to our residents in infrastructure at 2%. And there are many on this council that are feeling that, of course, we want to be very sensitive to our residents and our businesses, and understanding what the direct impact is to individuals and businesses is important for us to understand, because we've also tried to increase the fees to be able to more accurately capture what we're actually expending. Understanding that, of course, at the end of the day, it's somebody that's paying for these increases, but I don't know that we do ourselves or future councils a service if we reduce too much currently and don't have the reserves, because that's really where we've been able to survive the last couple of years, because who would have ever anticipated that we would have had to do, we did a tax reduction as well as 0% for several years, in essence putting us in a place where we had savings, but we didn't capture the growth. And of course, we're all very sensitive to the fact we don't want individuals to pay more than they have to. I mean, ultimately, we're all taxpayers too. We're all residents of this community and business owners, so understand that, but I think the direct impact is important for us to understand. Also, realizing that we can't starve future councils by not replenishing our reserves, because that's what the intention is that we're not only building for today, we're building for 30 years from now. And there are some debts, for example, the debenture on the Forest Main. If we didn't invest in that, councils and future residents would be extremely disappointed if we weren't investing in that right now.
Absolutely, thank you. We have my slide up. So this net municipal tax increase at the 5%, what does this mean to the average citizen? So to the average homeowner at a $300,000 assessment, it's $11.36 per month. And on a small business, it's $27.27 per month on equivalent $300,000 assessment. And this is at the small business rate that we have currently, not at the non-small business rate.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So that's at the 5%.
That is at the 5%.
Average $300,000 home. And then do we still need to add the fees on there as well?
Yes, so then
So-
that would be the $4.80 per month for utility.
So I think what I had written down before was like 16 monthly.
Yes,
Okay. So that's what we're looking at monthly to that average for this 5% increase.
And I think we all gotta remember too, that's based on last year's assessment.
that's
As
correct.
the
So
assessment goes up, so does the tax. Or no matter where we leave our percentage at. So,
can I make a comment to that? So we have to remember that assessment and mill rate is set apart. So right now, we're setting net municipal tax collected. So if residential goes up, all of us have the same houses. There's not new houses added, but our assessment each goes up 2% evenly, and the mill rate goes up. We are only paying the same percentage because we're all paying for the same part of the pie. So even if we increase the 5% and then our assessments go up 2%, we're not now paying 7% more. We're just all each paying our little portion of that same pie that's now just slightly bigger. So what could also impact that would be additional houses added. So additional assessments added into our pie. So we actually know that there are new residential households. So then by us increasing 5%, but then maybe there's an extra 2 or 3 homes assessed, we might actually be paying slightly smaller pieces of the pie. I'm not condoning the 5% or the 2%, like anything of that sort, but we have to remember that we're setting net municipal tax to be collected. The mill rate is set in the new year once we know the assessments. So these dollar values could very well change if we have a lot of residential add, and then growth might cost the net homeowner $8 a month. We don't know for sure because property taxes are set based on net municipal taxes and the assessment, and that's how we develop the mill rate.
so moving forward, we already know that if we raise it to 5% this year and replenish a little bit of the money that we've been taking out of reserves, that we will not be able to operate next year, again, with increased prices and what we're gonna be seeing in policing cost alone and other things that are be going up. So we are now capturing in this budget what it really costs to operate, But typically, we do a lot more capital projects than we do. Our MSI is down 30% than what we traditionally would be getting 5 years ago. We don't know what the LGFF, the new funding source in the province for capital projects, is going to look like. Would we like to take on more paving? We certainly would. Would we like to, to do a lot more upgrading to sidewalks and stuff? We're not adding to that at all right now because of the fact that our funding from the province is down. And we're not sure where the LGFF is going to be. But I can guarantee you that we're not going to make it through next year without a tax increase, based on the policing cost alone. Go ahead, Director Saskew.
Thank you. Do you mind posting my slide? So this is, I'm going to take you back to the slide from the last time. This is showing the gold bar is what the town has done. So 2019 and 2020 budgets, we had equivalent taxation levels. And then 21 and 22, we had the 2% decrease. 2023, we went back up to the current year. And then the proposed 5% in the current year is taking us to almost the equivalent level of if we had just gone from 2019 and done 1% increase each of those years. And as you recall, by us not doing an annual increase year over year, we are in the tune, I believe, of $1.3 million short on taxation revenue. So by reducing it by that 1% doesn't seem like it seems like a nice tax rate for the citizens, but you have to remember that as an aggregate, it could amount to a lot of different lost revenue. Not that I'm condoning the 4% or the 5%. I'm a taxpayer as well. I would appreciate the 4%, but it is something that council needs to be aware of, is that 1% year over year is not the same as 0% and 5% 5 years later. There is actually lost revenue that is missing there. So all of the areas where the blue bar is higher than the gold, that is lost revenue that we have missed, and that was our break to taxpayers during unprecedented times of COVID.
Okay, so I think we all know where we're at, and the decision to make is, as long as everybody understands that moving forward next year, no matter what we tax this year, if we go with the 5%, will be $96,000 more in a reserve. Still, we would be taxing again next year, and there's just the way things are right today. There's, unless, and we start capturing some of this growth, and we see more houses, more non-res, or basically non-res that's adding a lot more to our assessment. So go ahead, Councillor Berry.
Just a comment or a question. I appreciate that, yes, next year, like you're pointing out, there has to be consideration for tax increases, which also means that it might be more difficult next year to look at what's going into reserves. So the aspect is perhaps the monies that we're putting in reserves this year, we forgive putting into reserves next year to try and protect our taxes. But for this year, I'm hoping that we do get more housing assessment and more non-business or business taxes and et cetera, so that when you do put the mill rate on there, that we don't see as much. Maybe we can all benefit from it, but maybe in the next couple of years that'll happen as well. My feeling is that I've got to stay with putting in a little more reserve this year, and then hoping that helps pad us for next year. Thanks.
Well, we don't actually have a reserve for policing. So, I mean, no matter what you do, I mean, these reserves are set up to carry forward with needs and you know, when the time is right or when needed. But we don't have a reserve for the police costing, so.
Maybe we need to take the 94,000 and put it into reserve to help cushion what's going to cost us for RCMP next year.
Create a new reserve.
Well,
I imagine
that's what
their
reserves
union
are
would
for,
love
is
to
to
know
try and
about
protect
that.
us.
All municipalities have a reserve for that. Okay, so what you're saying is you would, just to shorten this up a little bit, I think we're all done speaking. I mean, we all know what's in front of us here. So Councillor Bullock has made it clear that he's not going to support a 5%, he's at a 4%. And yourself, Councillor Berry, you're feeling that you would like to stay at the 5% this year and hoping that the increase won't be as much based on some other housing and some other stuff coming onto the tax roll. Okay, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Lemko, where do you want to be?
Split the difference, 4.5%, but I will support a 5% increase.
Okay, Councillor Curtis.
I'm in support of 5%.
Okay, Councillor Rudick.
I'm in support of 5%, and I think one thing that we didn't talk about here is we didn't talk about the opportunity that we have with increased revenue from our interest. And so capitalizing on the reserves that we have is actually a double putting away for the rainy day too, so.
Well, and we've been fairly lucky because since we've sold the Trans-Canada building, that money we've held, we didn't pay off that debenture because that debenture at the low interest rate that it is will be the town's portion of Prosperity Park. So we are making some money there, but we're about to pay off the last of those bills. So just so everybody understands that the cost of the park is actually the debenture payment from the Trans-Canada building that's been sitting there collecting no taxes and around $60,000 a year in utilities. So that being said, I am going to support a 4% tax, and that's basically what I've been trying to get to here today. But we have a majority that is representing 5, and I understand why. It will probably lessen the burden next year, or the fact that maybe it's more prudent to build back some of the reserves we've been living off. So I'm fine with the 5. Really, I mean, I was trying to get to 4. There's no doubt about it, but we're not there. So I think overall, the next council meeting, you're going to bring a budget to us with the 5% in what we're looking at today, the way it is. And will we get to choose where the reserves, what reserves we'll be topping up?
Absolutely. I normally just put it through the general line, and we can have a reserve workshop where we look at all of our reserves in detail at the minimums and the maximums and go that way. Or the other option is to pick the reserves that you want to fund right now, and we can fund them from there. It's all the same line item, but it's really up to council where you want to.
Exactly, and we have some reserves that are below where they should be, and again, that's operating against our procedures by running those reserves where they're at. Okay, so if anybody has any questions out there regarding the budget, please get a hold of CAO Ling, and she'll help you. Go ahead, Councillor Rudy.
We are going to be bringing, or staff is going to be bringing this forward to council in a couple of weeks' time at our council meeting. And is there an opportunity for the public to be able to digest some of this information or understand it? How is our communication plan going to be to disseminate what's a very complex set of documents with the public so that they can understand what our decision is? Like right now, of course, we don't know the ultimate assessment, but when we extrapolate $16.16 a month is about $193 for average homeowner with a $300,000 assessment on their home. How are we sharing that with our public?
In the past, we've done not like a news release, but an article on our website, as well as social media posts directing the public to our website, where we've shown the breakdown. For the average assessment, it's going to cost each household this much and this much and this much. So our plan is to go ahead and do that again. We can do it before the budget, because it's always been done in the past after the budget, but we also haven't done this type of a jump in quite a while. So we can definitely get something out to the public. These YouTube videos are on our website. Are on our website and our YouTube channel. They can always go back and watch them to understand some of the decisions that have been made. But we can also put down a little highlight for them to look at, saying, these, within a 5% tax increase, these are our pressers that we are looking to cover off, i.e. the increase to our CMP, the covering off of the benefits, which is kind of in lieu of a COLA for the staff, that type of stuff, and break it down a little bit more for them, but ideally, they're gonna get their most fulsome understanding by watching these videos.
Well, I mean, it's a guesstimate right now. Until we get our full, complete assessment in, it's still a guesstimate.
Yeah, and ultimately, until we sit down and do the work on our tax bylaw, which unfortunately we don't do until the new year because we do wait on information from the provincial government and the assessors and stuff like that, we won't have the true picture until then. But we're getting pretty good at being really close.
Okay, well, it looks like it for the day. So I guess that's it, but there's nothing else to report, right? So I'll adjourn this meeting at 11:31.